But Tom's Hardware is reporting that
Yeah,
SSD bait and switching means you might not get the performance that you expect when you buy an SSD product. You know, part of me is actually kind of annoyed that this is in the news right now because I wish I'm going to check this spreadsheet, but I think it was like days ago that I was like, hey, yeah, that's like a thing. We should make a video about that. This should be illegal is the title that I wanted to have for the video. So I'll probably still do it. We'll do it in the next little bit. But basically it talks about, here's my notes. Taking a product that has been revised throughout its life cycle silently, like an SSD, hurting performance is my notes. And I put that in like a few days ago. And now it's like breaking news and everybody's going to be talking about it. That's okay. I still have a good title, so it shouldn't matter. People will click the crap out of a title like that. So it's fine. I'm just annoyed. Anyway, Luke, why don't you walk us through this one?
What do you think if the revision is documented?
If the revision is documented and does not negatively impact performance in any way that is not overcome by some other benefit, then I'm fine with it. Silent revisions are fine.
What would another benefit be? Like a cost down or something like that?
Like let's say an SSD. Let's use an SSD as an example. No, a cost down is not a benefit to the consumer. A cost down is a benefit to the manufacturer, and they can spin it as a benefit to the consumer if they actually lower the price, but a cost down is just a cost down. So the way that I see it, if let's say an SSD, they changed out the controller such that the sequential reads and writes no longer meet the manufacturer spec, but the random performance is actually marginally better, such that in a real world scenario that most customers would use it in, it actually performs a little better. I'd say that's fine.
Okay. Yeah.
That's my take on that.
Yeah. So what's going on here is the Tom's Hardware released a report this week regarding SSD manufacturers changing not just NAND flash, but also the SSD controllers. That is really kind of crazy.
It's a much bigger change than changing the flash.
Yeah. The flash, that's, I mean, maybe not so hot, but I'm not too surprised it's happening. Changing the whole controller is pretty wild.
And there's ways you can change the flash that don't hurt the performance or don't in a meaningful way.
And I would maybe argue that this is why usually I'd say when you're doing benchmarks, you don't use your old numbers. But I guess in this case, they would have the old SSD.
Yeah.
Anyways,
so even if they rerun it, they would get the same numbers.
It wouldn't matter. Yeah.
Yep.
Still, you should rerun it. But yeah, in this case, that wouldn't have saved them at all. So completely ignore that. The report looks closely at specifically, but I'm sure it happens to more than just this, ADATA's XPG SX8200 Pro. Tom's Hardware originally reviewed this back in 2018, and the drive sat on their best SSDs list for quite some time. These running changes that have happened to this SSD have had a massive impact on performance, with a 41% slowdown in file copy performance. And it says in the document a 500 megabyte per second decline in light workloads after the unreported changes.
Tis a big oof, sir.
That's a massive oof, I would say. That's pretty rough. As Tom's updated their top listed SSDs in favor of new releases, they noted that ADATA had changed their controller, firmware, and NAND. It's a new device entirely.
Just with the same product name.
What is this? Is it like Theseus's ship or whatever?
What is it?
There's this story. I think it's Theseus's ship, but I don't fully remember. Where there's this ship, and through the course of sailing it over years and years and years, it undergoes repairs constantly, right?
Sure.
But at a certain point, every single part of the ship has been replaced. Is it the same ship?
Here we go. Even though the materials it's made of change, the shape, the name, and the design stay the same, so it is the same ship. It is the same ship if other people think it's the same ship. That's another way of thinking about it. There's the whole philosophy foundation.org ship of Theseus thing. Yep. Okay. So that's a whole thing, whole rabbit hole.
Like the SSD of Theseus. is it the same SSD?
If they can convince all of you that it's the same SSD, then is it the same SSD? No.
Yeah.
The answer is no.
Yeah. Not when you change the controller firmware and NAND.
The answer is no, you butthead. That's the real
You should
answer.
change the name and sell it as something different.
Now, it's not uncommon for manufacturers to be forced to change the parts that they use. For example, DRAM. I remember back when I first got into computers, there was a whole thing around Winbond BH5 chips being like the shiz, and then being discontinued, and then it was Samsung TCCDs, and then I think they were called UTT. So UTT was short for untested, apparently, and a lot of manufacturers, notably OCZ, I shouldn't say manufacturers, a lot of DRAM sellers, notably OCZ, would sell TCCD products, which were Samsung chips that had really good overclocking characteristics, very efficient. They'd run at really low voltages. And then they would have like basically the same or very similar product, like not easily discernible to the consumer, that would have these UTT dies in them. And they were like great for overclocking. Like they would sell these like overclocking centric SKUs, and then they would just like warranty them. Like they would rate them to these crazy voltages that people were happy enough to pump through their RAM. But they were just like crappy dies that were cheap. And so companies were just like OCZ were just selling them as premium memory and then just warrantying them at these crazy voltages, knowing that a bunch of them were going to die. And it was like this whole, it was this whole crazy thing. And I forget where I was going with this story, but the point is, right. The point is BH5s went away. TCCDs eventually went away. And that doesn't mean that all of a sudden a Corsair or OCZ or a Mushkin or whoever the case may be, that doesn't mean that all of a sudden they don't still need to sell like, you know, the 3200 megahertz CL5, you know, RAM kit. So they've got to put something on it. So in a lot of cases, the DRAM chips, and you'll see this with graphics cards too, the DRAM chips can change. And I'm okay with that as long as they don't use anything that doesn't meet the spec. SSDs are one of those products where they can still reach the spec if all they spec it in, if all they spec is like sequential reads and writes, they can still reach the spec without having the same performance characteristics. So it becomes this really kind of scary gray area for consumers. I don't know if this is a note from Tom's Hardware or Hexus, who have both reported on this, but it is a good best practice. If you want to know that exactly what you buy is going to be exactly what was reviewed 6, 9, 12, 18 months ago, then buying from an SSD manufacturer who is vertically integrated like Samsung is a pretty good bet. Intel, to my knowledge, also has not pulled these shenanigans, but I do know that some others, I know Kingston's done it, I know AData's done it, have pulled this kind of crap and not been very transparent about it. I remember having a really funny experience once with a stick of Corsair XMS2 memory. The revision, like the version number, so they'd have a part number and then a version number. The version number was like 17 point something. And I'm like, how many different sets of dies have you had on this thing? This is incredible. Because DDR2 was around for a long time by that point. And it amused me. It amused me a lot. That's all I have to say about that now.
I just realized I had you on. Whoops, didn't mean to do that. I had you on a monitor I don't normally have you on. So I realized this whole show I've just been looking like off the window. So sorry, I've now fixed that. Where did I put the WAN dock? But yeah, this is brutal. I don't necessarily think we need to go through a ton of the rest of the notes. It covers a lot of stuff that that you just covered, to be completely honest. But yeah, this is not good. And I'm happy they released that. I hope you release your video. I think it'll be really interesting to dive into. I think some amount is fine, and if the difference is relatively negligible,
yeah,
like it's not really that big of a deal. Like if the performance drop was like, if it existed and if it was measurable, but like it was pretty darn small, like sometimes you just got to do what you got to do. You might not be able to get the supplies you had in the past. It's remarketing this whole new device is going to be a nightmare, blah blah blah. Like it sucks. It's not good for the consumer, it's not good for the manufacturer, it's not good for anybody, but like maybe it has to happen. But dropping 41% improvement,
yeah,
and all these other crazy things just is completely unacceptable.
And the worst case is the ones where they like clearly know it's going to happen, like they send out review devices and then like almost immediately they rev the product.
Yeah,
that's dirty. And like this has been a thing in like thumb drives forever. But the difference is that nobody ever cared because they were thumb drives. But I mean, it's actually kind of funny to think about. I remember like back in the early 2000s, mid 2000s, thumb drive reviews were totally a thing, especially right around the time USB 3 was coming out. So that was like late 2000s. Thumb drive reviews, absolutely a thing. So you would send out your thumb drive for review. It would be like the fastest one. And then you just rev the flash, put crappy flash on it, and now you're selling a bunch of thumb drives that are garbage. But people think it's good, and they're never going to benchmark it because it's a thumb drive. Who cares? Yeah, man. Manufacturers always finding a way to do us dirty, hey?
Sorry, I have to send you this.
Oh, what's up? I don't
Do
know
you
if,
remember this?
I don't know if I have an easy way to check. Is this Discord? Oh,
Yeah.
lordy. Patriot 16 gig holiday stocking USB drive unboxing and speed test. Okay, there you go. Luke managed to dig it up. I have personally reviewed a thumb drive. Hold on a second. No, we're pulling this up. We're pulling this up, ladies and gentlemen. Here we go. Let me just move this a little bit. There we go. There it is. Patriot 16 gig holiday stocking whatever thing. Here, we're going to listen to it together. I made that sound effect. I clinked
Now you're
a
probably
fork on a glass or
deja
something.
vu. I've seen this before. This is the Patriot holiday tree and the Patriot Snow Person politically correct USB flash drive. So the holiday tree is 4
Wow.
gig. The Snow
I was sassy, hey? Snow
and
person.
there's one that I didn't have before and I didn't know I was getting, so I went and shot the video already. But now we have the Patriot holiday stocking. So that is the
How did I make a 4-minute video about a USB thumb drive?
About a like holiday themed 16 gig thumb drive.
I think it was like it was either a promotional item or we got them at like a really good price or something. And look at that, 12 megabytes a second.
and then it's dropping off a little bit.
I don't sound very impressed. All right, we can put
I don't think this
that
was
away.
the only one we did. I remember there being a tree.
No, that I acknowledged it right at the beginning of that video. I was like, this it's the same thing again, but slightly different housing. I had one of those for years and years. I pulled the tree off of it because it interfered with like everything when you tried to plug it in, but I used it for many years. It served me very well at 12 to 13 megabytes a second.